Good morning and welcome to the review of The Family Trade by Charles Stross. This is the first book in the Merchant Princes series, and I bought this one and the number 2 a while back. I've only read Stross's, I had always only read Stross's science fiction cyberpunky work before, and I liked it. And I looked at this and I thought yes or no or yes. Eventually I bought them both and I've just finished this one. I think it's got a lot of problems. I would probably give it on Goodreads 2 out of 5. I feel that's a fairly generous rating, to be honest, for a number of reasons, some of which I'm going to get into. So brace yourself for a whole lot of complaining about things I didn't like in this book, and I won't hit the spoilers till later. So if you think you're going to read it, stick around for a while. I'll warn you to go away before I start spoiling it, which I will have to do. So it sounded really good. It sounded like it was a clear case of world-to-world journeying. Now this is a trope. Is it a trope or is it a subgenre? Maybe it's a subgenre. It's one that I have loved for a long time. The first such book I ever read was The Forgotten Door. That was a children's book. It's a marvelous children's book. Not too many people have heard of it, but little John falls through a door that had been forgotten into the current world, which in this book is America, 1920s. I'm not talking about that book. I'm talking about this book. Then I went on in my teens. I discovered Marion Zimmer Bradley. She's mostly remembered for her Darkover series, but she had some marvellous standalones, and one of them is A House Between Worlds, where a young Berkeley University professor ends up going through into another world. There's plenty of them. And the other ones, the ones I really love in this genre, are from Roger Zelazny. One of my most favourite authors, as you will know if you've watched a few of my videos by now, Roger Zelazny can do no wrong. And only with reading this have I realised just how many Zelazny books do involve world-to-world movement. It's like all the Amber Chronicles basically start with a family who can traverse from world to world, manipulating the fabric of time and space, moving through shadows, as they call them. Road Marks, another one of my really favourite Zelazny's. Again, the ability to move from world to world, past to future, etc., etc. I've recently finished the first two Changeling series. Again, world to world. So apparently it's a big thing. And the line that decided me on buying the first 2 of the Merchant Princes were a bold fantasy in the tradition of Roger Zelazny's Chronicles of Amber. Thus are the mighty fallen. Well, I debate the Roger Zelazny. I would say the only Zelazny connection that I can see between this and any of his work is the fact that there is this world-to-world traversing. So anyway, the family trade starts out in modern, post-computerized America. Might be New York or Boston, or I don't know, it's America. Coastal America, possibly East Coast, maybe. Anyway, we have this up-and-coming investigative journalist, Miriam Beckstein, who has been working on this great expose of a whole heap of money laundering businesses. And she gets her researcher called Paulie, I think that's short for Pauline, and together they go to the CEO with this breaking news story, and he listens to them, and they go back to their desks, and within 5 minutes they're being escorted off the premises by security, and when asking why, they're told that they've been looking at pornography at work or something equally trumped up and manufactured. So Miriam and Paulie are out of a job, out on their ass, and Miriam, one of the first things she does is go to see her mother Iris, And we hear that Miriam is an adopted child, that Iris and Morris had adopted her. Her mother had been killed when she was young. She is very refreshing, our Miriam, in that unlike so many I am adopted, I must find my parents type narratives, Miriam knows exactly who her parents are. Her parents are Morris and Iris, who raised her up. Her mother is Iris, who's always been there for her. She has no doubts about that. The fact that she's adopted seems to her fairly negligible in the scheme of things. Okay. And I like that. Now, another thing I really did like is I liked the fact that we had... Sorry, bird. We had started out with two pretty strong women, Miriam and Pauline, and later Iris, so that's three. Pauline and Iris are in their 30s. Both of them are divorced. They're strong career women, and I've got to say, Charles Stross seemed to me to write very well across the gender rift. Some can, some can't. His main female character is good as a female character. I never had that feeling of, oh, this is a man's interpretation of what a woman is. A couple of times, tiny bit maybe. But overall, he does a really good female character. So, way to go, Charles Stross. There are other things that he doesn't do as well. There are a lot of other things that he doesn't do as well. And a lot of them have to do with writing inconsistencies, which I'm going to go into some specific ones. And the big one at the end is an ongoing complaint with mine about series. This book doesn't have an ending. There's a frantic, frenetic, incomprehensible pacing to this book that didn't really do it for me. On the good side, the notion behind the world building is great. I loved the overall concept he had. I just don't think he did that concept very well. At least not in this book. Maybe in other books he does. In this one, it falls far short of what it could have been and what I feel it should have been. So from here on, I'm not going to worry about spoilers. So if you think you're going to read The Family Trade, if you're in the middle of reading The Family Trade, if you are loving The Family Trade, whatever, the algorithm, never mind the algorithm, leave this review now, go away, read it, come back. Right, that said. So, Miriam visits her mother Iris, and her mother Iris gives her this little box that she's never given her before for a number of reasons. And it's a pretty little shoebox. It's got all these articles about the events surrounding her mother's death in the park across the street. And there's this locket that she gives to Miriam and says, maybe you take care of that. I think it might be valuable. Miriam isn't initially terribly interested. She goes through the box, she reads the articles, she picks up the locket, and that's when she finds out that by staring at the pattern, which is described as a kind of Celtic knotwork, she falls through and into another world. Where to go from here? Okay, so this type of world building is exactly what I love. Strong, intelligent woman falls through to another world, has to find her way in it. Great concept. But early on there started being these inconsistencies in the writing that annoyed me. They jolted me out of the reading haze. They meant that I didn't love it and I was irritated. So, for example, I've noted some of them down. Page 41. She emerges into this other world by staring at the knotwork, not for the first time. And she's on the brink of some chasm, and that explains why she skidded. Except that she didn't skid. And I went back over the last 2 pages. I read them 3 times looking for this alleged skid. Because if you're telling me that the gully explains why she skidded, you need to have told me that she skidded. Stross. Bad Stross. More editing. Page 43. Same expedition. The sound of a breaking branch in this silence of woodlands with no inhabitations and no chemtrails in the sky. Sound of a branch goes to Mars, except she hasn't broken a branch and no one else has broken a branch and she hasn't heard a broken branch. When I got this breaking branch, I thought, shit, there's someone else in the woods with her who's broken a branch. No, there's nothing. Nothing. Proofreading, Stross. You needed more of it. Page 56. Page 56 was particularly tricky because by now we've already had Miriam and Pauline kind of tooting their own trumpet, as Dolly Parton had it in some movie or other, about how intelligent and how together and how investigative and how smart they are. It's like pat, 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 pat. So Miriam's trying to decide where she's gone. Has she gone into another world? Maybe she's gone into the far future. But there's no hint of the city that she lives in around her. So probably not the far future. Maybe she's gone into the past. And there's a statement, maybe it's the past. She's found this medieval English-looking village by now. Vikings reached North American continent in the 11th century. Yes, they did. So, nice touch, I guess. But on her previous expedition, she came across a road, and on the road there was a patrol of knights in armour, mounted on horses, and one of them lifted a rifle and shot at her. And I don't care how historically illiterate this chick is, and she is historically illiterate, we find out. She's virtually uneducated in any type of history at all. But no matter how stupid you are, no matter how much you've read, no matter how little you've read of anything except 12 Ways to Influence People and Make Friends or whatever it is she reads, you should be able to figure out that knights in armour in America never happened, and that knights in armour shooting M16s never ever happened. That should not require a level of intellect above my birds. And Miriam, the incredibly smart, terribly sharp, whoa, yo, investigative journalist, ta-da, can't figure out that knights and M16s don't go together. She's not in the past. That was absolutely painful. Was it meant to be a joke, Stross? Were you having a joke on us? I don't know. Maybe it came from a D&D game where they had M16s and knights and paladins, or so. I don't know. Okay, then we progress on to page 66, and now we've got Pauline and Miriam sitting down. Miriam tells Pauline everything, which, under the circumstances, if not sensible, is kind of comprehensible. And the two of them are brainstorming about the whole stuff that Miriam's learning about the other way, exposing their mutual naivety and stupidity in a big way. I've got to say, naivety and stupidity in characters I can cope with, but it's hard when the characters are telling you, the reader, how smart they are and how they know everything and they're surprised by nothing. And the author seems to be trying to tell us the same thing at this stage. And it's like a 50 or 60-year-old listening to 13 or 14-year-olds describe how the world works and managing not to smile because of the youth, and the youth will learn. And a particular gem from this particular conversation is when the two of them are going, there must be extra issues with the locket, because after all, your mother had the locket when she died and she didn't lose it to escape. For fuck's sake. The article that this dimwit was reading earlier describes the woman who was murdered in the park as wearing hippie-type medievalist gear. It's like 3 brain cells rubbing together should have figured out that, yes, she did use the locket. She was in the other world. She used the locket to get here and she died. Whatever. Okay, by page 100 we were thankfully, out of 300-page book, mind you, but thankfully we were past the I can't believe it stage, which is annoying. We were still slightly on the I'm an American citizen, I have rights stage. And at 1/3 of the way through the book, I feel we could have progressed a bit further in the I don't believe what's happening and I need my Mirandas or whatever. Really do. The Mirandas are required because Miriam has been kidnapped from her house by a whole heap of people that will put the FBI to shame in terms of efficiency, etc. They only slipped up by slipping on a book. I don't know what the book was. It clearly wasn't history or fantasy. But she's been taken through to this other world, the one that she managed to use the locket not work to get through. And is this alternative world? It isn't the past. It's kind of the present, but it's a present where the history is different. And yes, the Vikings did indeed come to North America, and North America has got a completely different configuration. It's not people who like that element of The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick will probably like this element as well, because you've got America and it's split into these different sections, but generally it's ruled by a clan of families. And the families can do this world-shifting thing using the Celtic design, and it's in the blood. You're either born with it or you're not. So they've got a certain number, but not enough purebreds, purebloods, who can look at the design shift between worlds. You've got a whole heap of associated members of the family who don't have it, but whose children may if they breed in the right line. So they're very parsimonious about letting people breed with the outdoors and, breed with outsiders. And this is the part that I liked and would have liked more of. The world building concept is great. I love these huge hulks of castles that they live in. I love the fact Stross really emphasizes how uncomfortable a medieval scenario would be for a modern person going back into it, or even Regency. So Miriam is forced to get into court dress to go to court, and there's all these formal rituals, and she doesn't know how to behave. One particular concept I loved is the doppelganger. So they've got certain castles and sites, but we'll go with the castle for now, where they have gone through into this world and found and purchased and secured that particular site, so no one can shift into their castle from that, because both sites that are equivalent in the two worlds are protected. And it goes without saying that these people that can go between worlds are incredibly wealthy. And Miriam, it turns out, is the daughter of the murdered woman who is actually a heir to two of these families, and she's deeply embedded, and she's told that she's never going to be able to escape. She's part of it whether she likes it or not. And around about now, while I'm enjoying the world building, I'm starting to really despise Miriam, because she's very, very stupid. She's moved into this world. There's pitfalls 1,000. She doesn't know how to speak the language. Most of the nobles speak English, but there's another language that she can't speak. She knows nothing about their history, their trade, their customs, their mores. She knows nothing. But the head of their secret police, or similar, is her uncle, and is sort of shifting her into it. So sure, she's rebelling against him like a sullen 12-year-old. Whatever. She's decided he's the bad guy because he saved her life. That's clearly the sort of thing a bad guy would do. They're incredibly wealthy. They've had dinner at a table with a young daughter character called Olga, who's about to be sent to court. Here's the thing that I've got a real problem with. Miriam, the investigative journalist, who's part of this incredibly wealthy family, doesn't ask to be taught anything about this world. She knows that they're private tutors. Wouldn't the first thing you'd say be, hey, I need a private tutor, maybe two. I need a quick update on the language, the history, the trade. I need to know everything about this world that I've been plunged into as a 30-year-old divorcee, where I'm going to be expected to make an advantageous marriage with one of the other families, and yet, as with my age, I am almost an independent family in myself. She doesn't ask for any training at all. She doesn't try to read a book. She doesn't try to find out anything about this world that is affecting her in a major way. Total and utter disinterest. She asks a couple of questions of this one guy who she later goes to bed with. When she remembers to, she quizzes the maidservant. Maybe not the best option. Just saying. She has a complete lack of interest in how anything works, and it's utterly bizarre. And then she decides that the best way for her to save her life, because someone's trying to kill her, is to start out a new trade venture that all the families will respect, and that'll give her a position in them. Except she doesn't know anything about the families. She knows virtually nothing about the trade. And she isn't bothering to find out. She's just sitting there in bed with her lover going, oh, we should do gold. We can totally do gold. It's like, you think they haven't thought about it? And she just throws out all these options like a 5-year-old who never went to school, deciding to teach the high people of the trade their trade. It's embarrassingly bad. But what's really embarrassingly bad about this is the way this is going, Stross is going to let her do it. Not in this book, but in one of the subsequent books. I'm sure she's going to make fame and fortune by having found this brand new trade that none of these extremely wealthy, very well educated, because some of them are educated over in this world. So you've got Harvard graduates, for God's sake. And she, who doesn't even know what they already trade in, is going to make the new fortune. Oh, just pass the bucket on that one, okay? So, by page 130, I was really annoyed by this. You've got Miranda, who we're being told by herself and by the author is this really smart, really sharp, really on the ball investigative journalist. She's behaving like a moron 99% of the time. She's giving mixed messages to her new relatives. She's giving mixed messages to us. She changes her mind every 5 seconds. And then, around about page 140 is where I really started to actively dislike Miriam. She comes back to this world with a minder, and she's given a platinum credit card with a several million dollar limit or whatever, and she can go shopping with it. And she goes, oh, I could pay all my mother's medical bills with that. I was like, yes, you could. Does she? No. She doesn't even contact her mother. She doesn't pay her medical bills. She doesn't give her a phone call. She doesn't do anything for her mother after realizing that she can. No, instead she goes on a shopping binge where she's buying all this camping gear and dresses, and she's buying all this stuff in order to disguise the fact that she's buying tech that she wants to use to take down the families. And honestly, by now, having been kidnapped out of her bed using high-tech, she should realize that their high-tech is better than her high-tech, and that their brains are better than her brains. And Stross should realize that too, and I don't think he does. But yes, let's talk about the camping gear. Every 5 minutes, Miriam is buying camping gear or track bikes or something. And the very first time she does it, when she ropes Paulie into her enterprise, she goes out, she buys all this camping gear, she gets Paulie to drop her in an isolated region in this world. She then skips through into the other one to test her camping gear. Now, right then, I lost any respect for any perspective intelligence that Stross is trying to tell us here. This is a scenario, even in this world, with the GPS and alert systems and people on standby waiting to rescue clueless travelers. This is a scenario where people get killed, where they don't know anything about camping. They go to the BCF, buy all this shit, head off into the woods, and then find out they don't know how to use it, and then they break a leg. Emergency have to come in and rescue them. There's actually an excellent YouTube video, Kyle Hates Hiking. Spoiler, he doesn't hate hiking at all. Which talks about all the scenarios where things can go wrong, even for experienced trekkers and hikers. And this little bint, with 3 floating feathers for her brain, decides it's a great idea, the first time she ever goes camping, to test all her gear, not only all on her own, with no one who knows how to camp, in a completely isolated area, but in a completely isolated area in another world. It's like, oh my God. She doesn't deserve to survive that, but she does. Multiple times. She's always buying camping gear. Yes, so Miriam isn't a nice person. She doesn't try to help her mother. She tries to buy stuff to divert attention from the fact that she's actually buying computer gear. And a whole heap of other things happen, and people try to kill her, and they don't succeed. They ought to, but they don't. As a symptom of how little I was enjoying Miriam's company, there's a point later in the book, she's been sent to court with Olga, the nice and unexpectedly characterful young woman who's grown up solely on the other side with no proper education. They go to court, and Olga finds out something terrible about Miriam, points a pistol at her, because sharpshooting is something that you're taught as a high-class princess in this world, along with needlework and flower arrangement. She points a pistol at her. She's about to kill her because of this horrible, horrible way she's been betrayed by her. And that's when that story cuts off. And I actually had a moment of going, wow, maybe if I'm really lucky, Olga will shoot Miriam and I can be I can be done with her, and we can have a new character for the rest of the series. Wouldn't that be marvellous? I knew it wasn't going to happen. We still had this much book. But I wished it would. It didn't. Miriam talked her way out of it. She's being set up by someone who wants Olga to kill her. And when that doesn't work, another party tries to kill both of them. And then some other party manages to kill someone else who isn't them either. Whatever. But at the point when Olga was about to kill Miriam and sadly didn't, that's when, right toward the end of the book, we flash sideways to yet more characters in another world, and a whole different scenario is landing down on us. And I don't think that was the time and the place, Stross. I don't think you had to do that at that point. Which leads us up to the thing that he really, really didn't have to do. The thing that I loathe and despise about all modern series, and it's always modern series, never older series. The ending that isn't an ending. Seriously, if you have read through 312 pages, I think you've got a right to some sort of a story arc ending. Something. Anything. But, nope. It just stops. ... Go buy the next book. Complete and utter fail of any sort of literary tradition doing that. And the sad thing is, I'm going to read the next book because I've already bought it. I bought the first two, but I'm telling you, by the end of that second book, I better have some sort of story arc ending, or I'm going to be even madder than I am now. Oh, and about that story arc, around about the time I was reading about doppelganger buildings, which was interesting, I started to get this vague suspicion that maybe I read this book. I think I read this book back 2010 or before I started using Goodreads to track the books that I'd read, to review them so that I'll remember them. I think I read this book, and I got so annoyed by Miriam, maybe I didn't finish it, but I definitely never went on to the next one. This time I'm going on to the next one so I can work up a truly impressive head of fury about all the really dumb things that Stross is doing with this complete moron who we are meant to believe is a wonderful, wonderful, smart, investigative journalist. I'm sure she's going to do more shopping. I'm sure she's going to do really stupid things. I very much fear she's going to come out on top in the end. She doesn't deserve to. No one that stupid deserves to live to breed. But my real problem here is that I think that the inconsistencies and the things I don't like and the stupidity of the main character all come down to poor writing on the part of Stross. And I think that's really sad, because the science fiction and cyberpunk of his that I've read was really good. So I don't know where this complete, frenetic, bouncing around like a ping pong ball, makes no sense, no stories start, no stories end is happening. It's coming from. It's like, and there's so many stories. You remember that story right at the beginning that started all this off? where they've just found the money laundering. Out the window with that. Then her mother in the wheelchair that she cares about. Out the window with that. We don't see her again for the rest of the book. It's like, I don't know. Maybe he's got all this plotted on the wall of his study at home and we're not allowed to see Iris for another book. Shame. She's a good character. I'm utterly exasperated by this book. It's got so much potential. It's got so many good things and it's done it so poorly. Anyway, that's half an hour of ranting about this book. I'll stop now. If you're still watching, thank you very much for watching. If you've read the Merchant Princess series and loved it, tell me I'm wrong. I'm good with that. If I should keep going even after the second book, which I suspect is going to be just as annoying as this one, let me know that as well. Thank you for watching. Read good books. Don't necessarily read this book though, because it's not a good